Здравствуйте, Пол. Мы рады снова вас видеть.
Hello, Paul. We are glad to see you once again in this warm company.
Мы бы хотели с вами пообщаться в такой непринужденной, спокойной, дружеской обстановке. И в первую хотел бы предоставить вам немножко слова. Возможно, у вас есть уже какие-то впечатления, вы что-то уже можете сказать для начала нашей программы.
Besides it being cold and windy, well, everyone I've met has genuinely been quite interesting to me, and especially the young people that I met at the two universities. Their curiosity just to discuss and to talk is to me thrilling.
Спасибо, Пол. И Ленар Нелович, я предоставляю вам слово.
Okay, Paul, certainly you're a very experienced person, and tell me, what do you think? How this place you visited first time? I certainly understand that first impressions, they can be sometimes very, say, superficial, but nevertheless, what do you think? How this place differs from other places? In what aspects? In spite of weather, certainly very cold weather.
I think two things come to mind first. One is the desire of all the people I've talked to and met, the desire for some kind of harmony between communities. So usually Muslim and Christian and Jewish and other communities aren't as well integrated as it seems to be here. I'd like to know more because I haven't really had enough time, but I met with the rabbi today and he said that relations between his people, him and his people, is very peaceful and very respectful, and that he has not run into anti-Semitism in his experience at all, which is highly unusual, especially, you know, a beard and hat and different way of dressing. And in the same way, the government officials I've met, the intention for there to be a kind of conscious harmony, to me, is very exciting. Everyone says these things, but not everybody, but most people say these things, but it doesn't mean that they act them. And from what I can tell so far, it seems like there's a lot of emphasis put on that, which not only is about your people having harmony, but even the desire to have independence from the central government so that you can protect that harmony. And when I spoke to the people who were in charge at the university, the Muslim university, just their attitude about protecting a moderate form of Islam from outside forces that wish to come in and make it a more radical form of Islam. So to me, that's thrilling. You know, life doesn't need to be complicated. Life doesn't need to be hard. Life doesn't need to be violent or punishing. We human beings invent that out of stupidity, any of us. You know, any of us who don't know how to communicate without violence just make the world a place that is dangerous for other people, especially people who are not privileged. So what I've seen here is a desire and an attitude that seems extremely healthy on the level of integrity and heart. And I think that's fantastic.
Мы смотрим на Канаду, я смотрю на Канаду, как некий пример возможного будущего. Для Татарстана тоже. Я объясню, о чем я хотел бы сказать. Во-первых, мы долгое время, 70 лет, были в некой такой жесткой, но понятной конструкции. Сейчас эта конструкция ушла. Появляются новые религии, появляются национальные движения. И в этом смысле мне интересна вот ситуация Квебек, миграционные процессы, которые вы уже прошли, а также расовые проблемы, которые для нас, они, возможно, тоже возникнут в будущем. Вот так, если сказать, взгляд с будущего в Татарстан, что бы вы нам посоветовали?
That's a big question. Well, in my own life and in my understanding of life, we have to start with just basic, simple laws, parameters. So my understanding and my experience in life is that our behavior, we human beings, we either behave from fear or we behave from not fear, which is from love, really. The question for me is how do we work with that? How do we practically work with that? The way I know how to work with it is that when I'm in fear, noticing my own fear, I ask myself what it would look like if I were in a loving place, not a fearful place. And then I always try to choose this way. So what I'm saying is, the question's a great question. You have to start before the problem exists. You have to start before it becomes a crisis. So it's, in a way, it's a combination of two things. It's treating other people with respect. They're different. They want something different. You know, fear and aggression is only met with fear and aggression. That's how it happens. So I'm not trying to simplify. Issues are very complex, but if we can start with trying to understand what the other people or person needs and wants, and try and address that with nonviolent attitude, like Gandhi, it doesn't make problems go away, but it's the healthiest way I know that we can approach them. So nonviolent communication actually begins with being able to hear the other person and asking them to hear you. I'll give you an example. A man who I admire very much is a man named Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. He's American, and he wrote a book that's not big called Nonviolent Communication. And what got me interested in his work was him describing one of his jobs, because he's hired by corporations, governments, families, and this particular job that he reported was that he was hired to work with two warring, feuding clans in the Middle East, two families, clans that had been killing each other for generations. And he spent 1 week in a big room with these two groups. And he reported that for the first 3 or 4 days, you couldn't hear because everyone was yelling. And for the next 3 or 4 days, they were singing each other's songs and dancing each other's dances. So it's not impossible to overcome tremendous, murderous differences. So somehow, whether it's Canada or Tajikistan, somehow we have to start before we get into violence and difficulty. It can still be solved, but I think what I'm hearing here is in some ways you're ahead of where we are in Canada.
В вашем фильме было, по крайней мере, такое ощущение, что вот ваш герой, ну, что он что-то переосмыслил в себе. Да. Было ли что-то, вот, что пересмотрели вы? Вот у вас взгляды как-то изменились, вы, может быть, что-то услышали из того, что он говорил, может быть, какая-то правота в его концепции тоже была?
I like the question. It's a challenging one.
Очень сложный.
Because we are all taught to avoid looking inside ourselves. The way parents bring up their children almost always is the parent isn't looking at themselves, they're looking at the child. Do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. So unfortunately, we teach children from the beginning to be in fear. But what I learned making the film, and what I learned in talking to DeLay, was to receive on a deeper level in me, in my heart, to receive him on a deeper level than I was used to. There's a definition of the word, I like the word compassion, and the best definition I've heard for the word compassion is feeling the other person's feelings. So learning about his childhood where his mother fired guns at him and his father beat him up, opened my heart towards him more than I thought it would, because I didn't know this about him. And I think the real magic in the film was just allowing the conversation, the dialogue over 5 years to be one where there was no desire to judge. He wasn't trying to make me wrong. I wasn't trying to make him wrong. And really, it was very courageous of him, given how he was brought up, to actually say at the end, but to say meaning to feel at the end, when he said, I still don't agree with what you did. He said this to me. I still don't agree with what you did as a civil rights worker, but I understand you now.
Вот снимая свой фильм, представляли ли вы своего зрителя? Я хотела бы узнать, на какую целевую аудиторию вы ориентировались. Или, может быть, вы работаете по принципу «я снимаю, потому что не могу молчать».
Well, I really made it to get to know who he was and to try and understand him. I wasn't trying to have him understand me. I wasn't trying for that. And I didn't have any idea of a target audience.
Скажите, пожалуйста, в одном из ваших фильмов речь идет о выпускном в Миссисипи, в городе Чарльстон, по-моему, если не ошибаюсь. И там уже участвует Морган Фриман. Вот расскажите, пожалуйста, про тот фильм, ну, какие-то основные вещи, почему вы его сняли, и про отношения с Морганом Фрименом что-то мне хотелось бы узнать, потому что он у вас присутствует, как я понял, в нескольких фильмах, может быть, какие-то особенные взаимоотношения сложились. Спасибо.
I wanted to go back to Mississippi just to see how things had changed, and I had no intention to make a film. I had no idea to make a film. I hadn't made a film for 15 years. I'd made many films, and I'd founded my own company, and I built it until it was the third biggest in Canada, but then I stopped making films for 15 years because there's many more things in life than just films. I heard that I read in the New York Times a statement by Morgan Freeman where he said he felt safer as a black man living in Mississippi than anywhere else in America, and I wondered, what's that about? Some friends of mine had produced 2 of his films, so I phoned one of my friends and I said to him, a good friend, and I told him I wanted to see if I could meet Morgan when I was in Mississippi to ask this question. So I arranged to meet Morgan, and in terms of the relationship, I want to tell you how it began, because it's not only fun, but it's important. So the day I met him, he picked me up at a motel in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and I came out of the motel and he's sitting in a big brand new, maybe $80,000, $100,000 BMW, very fancy. And I got in and I shook hands. Hi, Morgan. And he said, hi, Paul. And as he started to drive away, I looked at him, and he was wearing black shoes, black jeans, but very pressed, and a white shirt, dress shirt with his initials, and very pressed, brand new, and a black baseball cap from some U.S. Navy ship, maybe a film he had been making on a ship, I don't know. And as we drove away, I looked at him, and without thinking, I said to him, "You look gorgeous." And he laughed and he said, "Thank you." And I said, "You're welcome."
Спасибо.
And it wasn't treating him like a star, it just came out of my mouth. So as we're driving away to go have coffee, I'm thinking we'll spend half an hour together, I hope, and we're driving away, and he said that he had to make one stop first at the airport because they were having trouble with one of the jet engines on his airplane. I did my homework, and I knew that he was a jet pilot, and that he and his business partner own their own jet plane. And we're driving down a dirt road, countryside, and there's cotton plants and corn plants in the middle of farmland. And I thought of something that I wanted to say to him, and I didn't know whether my language would be something he would relate to. I said, this is really amazing reality creation. Reality creation. When he was 10 years old, he had no money. His family was dirt poor. But he would go to the one movie theater in Greenwood, Mississippi that would allow black people, segregated. Black people sat in the balcony, white people sat downstairs. And he dreamed of being a movie star. So I said, this is pretty amazing reality creation, because there you were, and now I'm sitting with you. And I said to him, I'm sitting with you in your big, fancy, rich BMW on our way to see your jet plane, and you're a big movie star. So this is amazing creation of reality from your dreams. So he paused a moment, and he said, well, you know, if you really want something, the universe will not give it to you. But if you really, 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 he said it 5 times, but if you really, 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 really want something, the universe always gives it to you. So I knew we understood each other, and maybe because of these 2 ways of communicating, when I first got in the car and as we were driving, when we were sitting having coffee, he looked at me and he said, I think I'll take you home with me. I said, cool. And I met his wife, and we spent 9 hours together. And while we were sitting by his swimming pool, just me and him, and we were talking about life and people and love and civil rights and how to live well, I thought, this is beautiful what he's saying. Somebody should be filming this. And it was like, I guess I'm the only one here. And so I came back a few months later, and I started making the what turned out to be The Last White Knight. I didn't think it was going to be that film. I thought I was making a different film in my mind. And one of the important things when you make documentary films, whatever you think at the beginning is fine, but if you follow your heart, you'll end up in a better film than you thought. So I finished making that documentary. I thought I finished, and I went back home. And the night I got home, my researcher in Mississippi phoned me around midnight, and she found something that I was looking for that we couldn't find, and that was somewhere where they still had a black prom graduation dance and a white prom graduation dance in the same community. And it was in his town of 2,000 people. It was in his town. And he never mentioned it because he doesn't talk about himself. So the next morning I phoned him up and I said, is this true that there's separate proms in your hometown and that you offered to pay for it if they'd integrate it, but they didn't accept your offer, which is what my researcher found out. And he said, yes, that was 10 years ago. And I just said without thinking, this is important, by the way. Thinking is very important, but feeling is more important. So I didn't say it thinking, I just felt it. So I said to him, is the offer still good? And he said, oh, okay. And I said, well, if you'll put the offer back on the table, I'll come back and make that film, because young people will be more interested in that story of a young dance than they will be about the film we just made with old people like us. So that's how Prom Night in Mississippi started.
Уважаемый Пол, я хотел бы вернуться к вашей работе. Ваш фильм называется «Последний белый рыцарь». Название очень символично. Когда я внимательно слушал, смотрел на высказывание Делея, мне показалось, что он не до конца искренен, что он что-то у себя как бы обдумывает. И когда был герой, вот когда представляли члена Ку-клукс-клана, сказал, мне 23 года, один из ваших героев. Это было пояснение, а сейчас я задам вопрос. Вам не кажется, когда вы работали над своим фильмом, что вот та эпоха активных выступлений за гражданские права, она сейчас переместилась на уровень взаимоотношений друг с другом, на уровень, может быть, взаимоотношений культур, наций. Вот этот процесс, что этот конфликт на самом деле не преодолен, а ушел вглубь.
I think the answer is mixed. There still is a very strong movement on the political and economic level to keep black people from having equal power. An example would be that in Florida, one of the methods for reducing black vote is to pick up young black men and charge them with something and jail them, and having a law that says if you're a felon, if you've been jailed, you lose your right to vote. This isn't my analysis. This is being written about and talked about in America. Another example, and this is my personal opinion, is the recent case of the man named Zimmerman, who killed the young black man Trayvon. And in that case, the man Zimmerman was acquitted of murder, even though he killed the young man on the ground with his gun, and the young man had no gun, was unarmed, and the jury acquitted him. It's just my opinion that if the shooter had been black and the man on the ground had been white, he would have been convicted. So these issues run very deep. The Southern Poverty Law Center, a very excellent group, lawyers group that works to use the law to protect people. It started in the South for black people, but it's about tolerance and protecting people from discrimination. Part of their work is to keep aware of hate groups in the United States, tracking hate groups in the United States and putting the information online for anybody to see. And before President Obama was elected, they estimated 1,000 hate groups operating in the United States. And now they estimate 2,000 hate groups. This increase in hate groups because there's a black president is the conclusion. Maybe it would be the same if there was a black Prime Minister of Canada or a black President of, of Russia or here. So I'm not singling out the United States. This is a universal problem. In every human being, we have prejudiced thinking, more or less. That's just the way the human mind works. But the reason the mind works that way is it's based in fight or flight. To protect the species, we need to know if we're in danger. So, for example, if it's true that all Muslims are terrorists, or that all blacks are armed and dangerous, or all Jews want to control the world, or women just aren't as smart as men. You see, if these things are true, we need to know. So the mind will present every possibility. That's its job. But the job of the heart is to say, no, yes, no. And we can always find truth. So Tatarstan or Canada or the United States or Russia, it's all the same. And in some places there's more enlightened thinking and more enlightened practices, and that's what I hope we work towards.
Первый вопрос. Почему вы хотели этот фильм показать в России? И чего вы ожидали от этого показа?
I want to screen it everywhere, and I want to have the discussion about moving beyond prejudice everywhere, because the truth is it's not difficult to begin moving beyond prejudice. It's not difficult. For example, I've trained myself to notice my own prejudiced thinking. I have between 2 and 5 prejudiced thoughts a week. And I just accept that because I'm human, but I've trained myself to notice, and then I do 3 things. First, I stop and I take a breath, which is the way to come out of the head and into the heart. See, this is in all of us. These are brilliant computers, but the guidance in life comes from here, not from here. When people behave badly, they're not listening here. So I take a breath to come from here to here. And then number 2, I ask myself, where did the thought come from? Where did my prejudiced thought, where did it come from? And sometimes I can remember hearing it. And the human brain is so amazing that it soaks up everything. Albert Einstein said that he thought that we use 10 to 15% of our brain, and he thought he used maybe 15%. My question is, what's the other 85% doing? One of the things it's doing is it's remembering everything. So after I take a breath, and after I ask myself where the thought came from, which is just interesting to me, I'm interested, then the third part, which is really the important part, is I ask myself if it's true. Is the prejudiced thought a truth? And the nature of prejudice is that it's never true. For an individual, it may be true. It may be true that that black person has a gun, or that Muslim is a terrorist, or that Jew wants to control the world, or that woman is dumb. It may be true about an individual. It's never true about the group because everybody is in fact different. So I don't know how to save the world. I do know how to take my films and have this kind of a dialogue. I would like to train other people how to do what I do so we can do it a lot. But for the moment, I'm doing it myself because I spent all my money making the 2 films. But there's a lottery in the United States this week, and this morning it was worth $600 million, and they think it might get to $1 billion. And I phoned a friend of mine in New York this morning and I said, buy me a ticket. So if I win, I'll be able to train many people to do this.
То, о чем вы сейчас говорили, да, это, я понимаю, что это оккультивирование осознанности. И я полагаю, что ваш фильм, хоть вы и говорите, что вы его показываете везде, тем не менее, это очень своевременная и чуткая реакция на процессы, происходящие в нашей стране в том числе. И вот сейчас как раз в нашем обществе мы можем наблюдать, как начинают проявляться какие-то настроения нетерпимости. И если до этого, вот мое поколение в частности, мы выросли на идеологии дружбы народов, то сейчас мы видим другие тенденции в обществе, к сожалению, имеют место. И не видеть этого нельзя. Сказал такую интересную фразу. Я защищаю свой дом. Я защищаю свой образ жизни. И вот подобная мысль, она очень здравой кажется и легко может найти сторонников и последователей. И вопрос, что значит дом для вас? Как вы чувствуете вот эти границы и вот эту территорию свою, и свою зону комфорта, или как еще иначе вы можете это обозначить? Что это для вас значит?
You know, this is what you're asking in the big way is very challenging. Where does self-interest stop and where does human interest continue? So first of all, I was born advantaged. Even though my parents were poor when I was born, I was white, I was in Canada, I was a man. All of those are advantages in the world, unfortunately. But I was taught by my parents the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. So I do feel comfortable all over the world because I relate to people and there are good people all over the world. My physical home outside Toronto is a place where I feel calm and safe. I know from the American visionary named Buckminster Fuller, who I had the good fortune to interview before he died. And he was a great thinker. Many governments consulted him, many countries consulted him. And he said that spaceship Earth, the spaceship going through space, has enough resources for everybody. The problem is distribution. So the difficulty when people come out of fear is they want more and more and more. I have a friend who has a friend, and his friend has $500 million, but he's not happy because his friends have $2 billion and $5 billion, so he feels bad. Imelda Marcos from the Philippines had 3,000 pairs of shoes. Elvis Presley had, I don't know, hundreds of suits. So you talked in the beginning about consciousness, and the most important thing I've learned in my life about consciousness, because somebody said it to me, somebody told me, you cannot raise consciousness unconsciously. The challenge to all men and women, to all people, is how to know that there's a better way than hatred, that there's a better way than greed. You know, how to know that. There's enough for everybody. How do we find a way to share? I don't know the big answer. I just know how to work as an individual. And here we are talking about it, and the cameras are recording it, so that's a beginning.
Thank you very much for coming. I think we are really very lucky to have you visited us here, because I think we have very rare chance to meet people like you with real open mind and very broadened mind. And I feel you have also a very deep spiritual personality. I think I don't know exactly, but I feel maybe you practice some kind of meditation or so on, and have some very deep, intimate experience. And because your words and your lessons to us, it's so deep spiritual, yeah. And my question is very simple and very personal maybe. Do you feel some mission you have?
In a way, I was fortunate that my parents were left-wing communist atheists. So they didn't teach me that God is this or God is that. They just taught me the golden rule, like I said. But I've discovered in my own life spirituality, which is not the same as religion. Perhaps it's supposed to be, but somewhere they sometimes... My understanding of spirituality is very simple. It's your relationship with your spirit. And my spirit is like your spirit. It's all part of the whole divine nature of reality. I think all the great spiritual leaders have said that it's about your inner relationship with all. So I pay attention to that every day. So meditation is like prayer. It's a key to the inside. And I've been fortunate to have people hand me or offer me tools for living well. So one of those tools, which somebody said to me, a very wise man in this case, he happens to be American, he said to me, you know, Paul, your spirit, your soul, is really your best friend. And so just like in the outer world, the best friendships you pay attention to. You learn how to give and how to receive. So that's what I do with my soul, with my spirit, with my heart. I learn to give and I learn to receive. And the biggest dynamic law that I've learned is to learn how to receive. And that means, you know, like Morgan Freeman said, the universe will always give you what's really, 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 really important. But if you don't receive it, and for me, the biggest thing I've learned how to receive is love and joy. You look at children, little children, they're filled with joy. And if they argue, they forget it and they go back to playing together. And you look at adults, where's all the joy gone? So my truth is the joy is still in there. So for me, meditation, I can do a 1-minute meditation. Just close my eyes, feel in, and the joy comes that fast. And I wish I had all the money in the world because I'd be very good at sharing it. I don't feel at all about having a mission. I don't. I think that would be almost because language is very slippery. What's that word mean? What's that word mean? So I appreciate your language and I receive your language, but I need to filter it through how I understand my language. So in my language, no, I don't have a destiny. I don't have a mission. I have a passion for living with joy, living with love, and finding people to meet there. I don't want to live with pain. I don't want to live with rage. I don't want to live with hatred. Why? It feels bad.
У меня такой вопрос. Вот фактически документальное кино — это то средство или инструмент, с помощью которого вы доносите очень важные мысли. И в этой связи такой вопрос. Вот в Канаде документальное кино смотрят? И где смотрят вообще документальное кино и общество? Как происходит взаимодействие? Почему возник этот вопрос? Считается, что российское документальное кино находится в затяжном кризисе. И его хорошее кино документальное показывают только на фестивалях, не считая тех документальных проектов, которые снимаются в телевизионном формате. Вот хотелось бы узнать, как обстоит ситуация в Канаде.
It's pretty much the same as you're describing. Canada has a very wonderful tradition in documentary filmmaking because of the National Film Board of Canada. And they've had to reinvent themselves in the last few years because of how hard it is to get documentaries on television or in the movie theaters. It's difficult to get them in. So they've turned more and more to the internet. So for documentary filmmakers in Canada, it's a major challenge to find little pieces of money here and here and here. The government does spend money in film and in documentaries, but it's not nearly enough given how many people want to make documentaries and valuable documentaries. But most people in Canada, like probably, I don't know, maybe most people here, they want to watch American television. They want to see American movies. You know, what's called reality television. What I mean by very sick is I think most reality television, not all, but most reality television is just about how to give you the most exciting moments one after the other as if it's the way real life is, and it's not. So we all do our little bit, and I pray that we manage not to destroy ourselves.
Итак, уважаемые коллеги, в завершение хотел представить слово представительству посольства Канады в России Джордж Коломбу. и с вопросом, удовлетворен ли он визитом, который прошел вот у Пола Зальцмана в Казани.
I'd like to thank everyone that's hosted us here. It was a great program. And I'd also like to thank you, Paul, for accepting our invitation to come here and sharing your film with us here. And it's an important part of our outreach and promoting human rights in Russia, and we'd like to thank you for that as well. And thank you all here for giving us a venue to meet with Paul and have an opportunity to show his film here in Kazan. We very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Давайте поаплодируем Полу.
Thank you.